Chapter 1. Darkest Night. It was a bitter November night in 1974, and a chilling wind whispered ominously through the empty streets of Amityville, Long Island. The sky was starless, a heavy cloud blanket hiding even the faintest glimmer of moonlight. Inside the looming Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue, the DeFeo family lay asleep, utterly unaware of the insidious darkness awakening within their home. The house itself seemed alive, inhaling the cold night air and exhaling malevolence. Ronald DeFeo Jr., known to friends as Butch, tossed fitfully in bed. His dreams were a maze of whispers, dark visions, and shadows that danced tauntingly just out of sight. He jolted awake, his heart pounding violently against his ribcage. Sweat coated his body despite the chill in the air, and a strange sensation crawled over his skin, as though unseen eyes were fixed upon him from every shadowy corner of the room. Voices murmured ceaselessly in his mind, indistinct at first, but gradually becoming clearer, commanding, persuasive, and malevolent. He clutched his head, attempting in vain to silence them. He rose slowly from bed, compelled by a force stronger than his own will, his feet cold against the hardwood floor. Each step he took echoed loudly, reverberating like a death knell. Guided by unseen hands, Ronald walked toward the closet, pulled out his rifle, and felt the weapon's cold weight reassuring yet terrifying in his hands. The whispers now screamed in his head, ordering him forward with irresistible power. He knew this was wrong, but the ability to resist was beyond his reach. Ronald moved silently into the hallway, his shadow elongating ominously as he passed under the flickering hallway light. The house was unnaturally silent, as if holding its breath, watching intently. Each creaking floorboard seemed to scream accusations into the night. He reached his parents' bedroom first, gripping the doorknob with trembling fingers. Slowly, quietly, he pushed open the door, his heart racing with a mixture of terror and strange excitement. His parents lay sleeping, oblivious to the impending horror. He raised the rifle, the barrel pointing toward their slumbering forms. His breath shook with every exhale, his eyes filled with tears that blurred his vision but could not halt his purpose. The whispers grew to a deafening crescendo, drowning out the screams that erupted with the first thunderous shot. His father's body jerked violently, and his mother stirred momentarily before another shot silenced her forever. A sickening dread filled Ronald as he turned, driven onward by the voices, now emboldened and bloodthirsty. He moved methodically from room to room, finding his younger siblings next. One by one, their innocent lives were ended swiftly, brutally, as the deafening echo of each gunshot filled the halls. Each body lay motionless, life extinguished in a terrible instant. Outside, the world slept on, oblivious to the horrors within 112 Ocean Avenue. The house itself seemed to absorb the violence, growing stronger with every life taken. Ronald moved robotically through the massacre, his emotions buried beneath layers of terrifying detachment. When the final shot was fired, silence returned to the house, thick and suffocating, broken only by Ronald's ragged breathing. Dawn arrived slowly, the sun hesitant to illuminate the house that had seen such brutality. Neighbors awoke to an eerie normalcy, unaware of the tragedy until police cars descended upon the home. Investigators walked through the chilling scene, baffled by the brutality and the complete lack of struggle from the victims. Ronald DeFeo Jr. sat in custody, eyes hollow and unfocused, claiming vehemently that an evil force within the house had compelled him to murder his family. As word spread through the quiet community, fear crept into every household. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue had suddenly transformed from an unassuming family home to a symbol of unimaginable horror. Rumors began to spread, whispers of evil presences, curses, and unexplainable forces at play. Ronald's haunting claims lingered ominously, casting a long and dark shadow over Amityville. And thus, With an act of unspeakable violence, the legend of the Amityville horror was born, forever embedding itself into the fabric of nightmares, yet to unfold. Chapter 2. Welcome Home. 13 months had passed since the gruesome murders that stained the reputation of 112 Ocean Avenue, leaving a dark void within the heart of Amityville. The neighborhood had gradually resumed a semblance of normalcy, attempting to bury the haunting memories beneath layers of routine and denial. Yet, a lingering unease persisted, invisible but palpable in the air around the house. Still, to outsiders, the house appeared peaceful, almost idyllic, with its stately facade and charming Dutch colonial architecture. December of 1975 brought George and Kathy Lutz to the doorstep of 112 Ocean Avenue. They were an ordinary family looking for a fresh start, completely unaware of the house's violent past. George, a pragmatic and strong-willed man, saw the affordability of the property as a rare opportunity, a stroke of good fortune too tempting to resist. Kathy, optimistic and nurturing, envisioned the home as a sanctuary, a perfect place to raise their children. Their 3 children, Daniel, Christopher, and Missy, eagerly explored the house upon their arrival, filling empty halls with laughter and excitement. The initial days in the home were marked by the pleasant chaos of unpacking and settling in. Boxes littered the rooms, stacked high and filled with memories of their old life, waiting to be transformed into pieces of their new story. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a subtle sense of unease began to simmer, one so faint and elusive that it went unnoticed by the Lutz family. Soon after their arrival, minor peculiarities started manifesting. Doors occasionally creaked open without prompting, gentle breezes would drift through hallways despite closed windows, and sudden temperature drops made certain rooms uncomfortably cold. Kathy, ever the optimist, brushed these occurrences off as quirks of an old house needing repairs. George, absorbed in managing their finances and adjusting to their new environment, dismissed them entirely. However, the youngest child, Missy, immediately felt drawn to something unseen. One evening, she told Kathy about her new friend, Jodie, describing him as a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes that watched her from outside the window. Kathy felt an instinctive chill run down her spine, but rationalized it as a child's vivid imagination. Still, the unsettling description lingered in her mind, echoing softly through her thoughts, refusing to vanish completely. As days turned into weeks, these strange occurrences multiplied, becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Inexplicable foul odors permeated the air, so pungent and revolting that family members recoiled in disgust, desperately searching for a source that could never be found. Walls began to show unusual signs of distress, weeping an eerie greenish slime that seemed alive and malevolent. George would spend hours scrubbing these stains away, only for them to reappear, darker and more extensive each time. George himself began to change. His usually calm and patient demeanor gave way to irritability and sudden bursts of anger. He would snap at the children over trivial matters, his voice unfamiliar and filled with venom. Nights became a battleground for George as he awoke each night precisely at 3:15 a.m., a strange compulsion urging him to patrol the property, drawn specifically to the boathouse. The same hour, unbeknownst to him, that Ronald DeFeo Jr. had executed his family. Kathy noticed the changes in her husband, but found herself struggling as well. Unexplained bruises appeared on her body overnight, tender and painful to the touch. She felt constantly watched, the sensation of invisible eyes tracking her every move. Nightmares invaded her sleep, grotesque visions of bloody violence replaying nightly, always vivid and detailed, as though she had witnessed the horrors firsthand. The children's demeanor shifted drastically, from vibrant and carefree to withdrawn and fearful. They would whisper quietly among themselves, casting frightened glances at shadows and corners. Daniel and Christopher refused to sleep alone, claiming to hear whispers and feel icy hands tugging at their covers. Missy remained enthralled by Jodie, insisting her pig-like companion was real, whispering secrets and promises that terrified her parents. The mounting fear in the household led Kathy to invite Father Mancuso, a priest, to bless the home. As he entered, a heavy dread washed over him, almost choking him. The blessing began calmly, but soon a sinister force violently expelled the priest, who fled in horror, his body trembling, warning the family to leave immediately. But the Lutzes, financially bound and unwilling to acknowledge the malevolence, ignored the warning, desperately clinging to their dream of a peaceful home. Each passing day tightened the sinister grip on the Lutz family, binding them ever tighter to a nightmare from which escape seemed increasingly impossible. Their dream house, once filled with laughter and hope, had transformed rapidly into a living nightmare, a house determined to destroy anyone daring enough to call it home. Chapter 3: Creeping Terror. The sinister events unfolding at 1-12 Ocean Avenue rapidly intensified, escalating far beyond simple oddities and mysterious occurrences. Every corner of the once welcoming home became a source of dread and anxiety for the Lutz family. The initial subtle hints of an evil presence grew overt, unmistakable, and terrifyingly aggressive. George found himself consumed by paranoia, his daily routines disrupted by obsessions he could neither control nor comprehend. He constantly chopped firewood, relentlessly piling logs, driven by an inexplicable fear that the house would soon grow unbearably cold. His eyes grew bloodshot from lack of sleep, his appearance haggard and unkempt. His reflection in the mirror gradually began to resemble a stranger, gaunt and haunted, strikingly similar to Ronald DeFeo Jr. Each night at precisely 3:15 a.m., George was compelled to patrol the boathouse, fixated by the thought that intruders lurked just beyond sight. The house seemed to whisper dark, intrusive thoughts into his mind, fueling his suspicion and dread. As George's condition deteriorated, his temper flared uncontrollably, erupting into violent outbursts directed at his family, further deepening the divide within the household. Meanwhile, Kathy struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the mounting terror. She desperately attempted to care for her children, shielding them from the growing horror while she herself crumbled under relentless psychological assaults. Invisible hands brushed against her skin, tugging at her hair, whispering incomprehensible threats in her ear. Her reflection in the mirror distorted grotesquely, appearing twisted and monstrous, causing her to recoil in terror. Her nightmares intensified, vivid visions replaying the brutal murders that had taken place in the very rooms she now occupied. Every night, Kathy awoke screaming, drenched in sweat, her heart racing uncontrollably. Exhausted and desperate, she turned to prayer, clutching religious icons in trembling hands, pleading for protection and salvation from the malevolent force haunting her family. The children's situation worsened drastically as the previously subtle manifestations transformed into direct physical attacks. Daniel and Christopher awoke to claw marks etched painfully into their skin, their screams echoing through the house. Objects flew violently through their bedrooms, propelled by invisible forces intent on harm. Toys activated spontaneously, emitting eerie sounds and unsettling laughter, mocking their terror. Missy's relationship with the entity she called Jodie became increasingly disturbing. She began to exhibit strange behaviors, isolated and withdrawn, speaking cryptically of things she couldn't possibly know, details of the DeFeo murders whispered to her by her demonic friend. Jodie's red eyes became a constant presence, glaring menacingly from the windows, haunting the child relentlessly. Walls throughout the house began oozing a thick, repulsive green slime that seemed to defy explanation, dripping incessantly and staining everything it touched. No matter how persistently George and Kathy scrubbed the walls, the slime returned, spreading wider and darker each time, defying all logic and reason. Paranormal investigators were reluctantly called in, though their presence only seemed to provoke the malicious entity. Equipment malfunctioned repeatedly. Recordings captured terrifying disembodied voices, growling threats and insults, and team members experienced violent physical assaults, shoved, scratched, and bitten by unseen aggressors. They departed hastily, warning the Lutzes that their house was profoundly evil. Desperate and running out of options, the family turned to historical records, uncovering the house's disturbing past. Rumors of occult rituals, curses, and tragic deaths predating the DeFeo massacre. Each revelation deepened their despair, confirming their worst fears. Their home was irreparably cursed, a haven for malevolence. Isolation became absolute. Friends and neighbors avoided visiting, sensing something profoundly wrong about the house and its occupants. The once friendly community now regarded the Lutzes with suspicion and fear, isolating them further, leaving them completely at the mercy of the evil force. The Lutzes' physical and emotional health deteriorated rapidly under relentless siege. Appetite vanished, sleep became a rare and fleeting escape, and hope dimmed into oblivion. The house, sensing their weakness, tightened its grip, determined to extinguish every last vestige of their humanity. Kathy, exhausted and barely holding on to her sanity, finally pleaded with George to leave, even temporarily. But George, now deeply under the house's influence, angrily rejected her pleas, driven by an obsession to stay, convinced by the house's insidious whispers that he alone could reclaim control. As the nightmare deepened, the Lutzes found themselves trapped, caught between the reality of their collapsing lives and the unimaginable horror of the supernatural. They began to realize, with creeping dread, that escape might no longer be possible, their fates irrevocably tied to the dark heart of 112 Ocean Avenue. Chapter 4: Unseen Forces. The terrifying phenomena at 112 Ocean Avenue escalated relentlessly, surpassing the boundary between psychological torment and physical danger. The malevolent entity within the house, no longer content with subtle manipulations, now asserted its dominance with aggressive and violent manifestations. The Lutz family, exhausted and desperate, faced an onslaught of horrors far beyond their darkest fears. George's mental and physical transformation continued to spiral downward. His demeanor shifted drastically, becoming volatile and unpredictable, influenced by sinister whispers that plagued his consciousness. Dark shadows danced around him, visible only from the corner of his eyes, taunting and provoking him relentlessly. His obsession with the boathouse intensified, compelling him to check it repeatedly throughout the day and night, convinced that intruders plotted harm against his family. The incessant compulsion drove him toward paranoia and exhaustion. One particularly chilling night, George woke to find himself paralyzed, suspended several inches above his bed. Panic surged through his immobilized body as an invisible force pressed against his chest, suffocating him. He struggled desperately, fighting to breathe, terror clawing at his sanity. When the unseen power finally released him, he collapsed onto the mattress, gasping for air, the echoes of malevolent laughter resonating through the darkened room. Kathy faced relentless torment as well. She experienced terrifying episodes where invisible hands violently grasped and bruised her, leaving marks that defied explanation. Every attempt to seek solace in prayer ended disastrously, as religious symbols inexplicably shattered or caught fire in her presence. Night after night, Kathy endured terrifying visions of the DeFeo murders, witnessing each brutal act with horrifying clarity, forced into the role of unwilling spectator to the house's violent past. The children were equally afflicted, their lives dominated by escalating supernatural attacks. Daniel and Christopher reported waking to unseen forces violently shaking their beds, lifting them off the floor and flinging them around the room. Their cries for help were muffled by an invisible force, leaving them trapped in silent terror. Toys and objects hurled themselves across the rooms, narrowly missing their heads, intent on causing harm. Missy continued to grow disturbingly close to the demonic entity she called Jodie. One night, Kathy entered Missy's room to find her daughter perched precariously on the windowsill, speaking softly into the darkness. Horrified, Kathy lunged forward to pull her back, catching a glimpse of Jodie's terrifying, glowing red eyes glaring hatefully from outside. Shaken and desperate, Kathy begged Missy to resist the entity, but the child seemed entranced, unwilling to abandon her sinister friend. The paranormal activity attracted the attention of seasoned investigators and mediums, each attempting to unravel the horrors within the house. However, their visits invariably ended disastrously, with violent confrontations and terrifying physical attacks. Mediums became possessed, speaking in grotesque voices, threatening and mocking the Lutzes, confirming the overwhelming power of the dark presence residing within the house. In a desperate bid for answers, George and Kathy delved deeper into the home's sordid history, uncovering even darker secrets buried beneath the foundations of 112 Ocean Avenue. They discovered disturbing evidence of ancient rituals, demonic summoning practices, and a long legacy of tragedy stretching back generations. Each revelation solidified their understanding of the true depth and magnitude of the evil force entrenched within their home. The Lutzes grew increasingly isolated, cut off from friends, family, and the community at large, all of whom instinctively avoided the house. Visitors experienced debilitating nausea, oppressive dread, and terrifying visions that left them shaken and unwilling to return. The Lutzes found themselves utterly alone, facing an unstoppable force that fed greedily on their fear, despair, and isolation. With every passing day, their physical and mental health deteriorated further. Sleeplessness, constant anxiety, and unending supernatural harassment drained their strength, leaving them vulnerable and nearly defenseless. The family existed in a perpetual state of dread, unable to find respite even in daylight, as the house continued its relentless assault. As the horrific experiences escalated, George and Kathy began formulating desperate plans to escape, driven by an overwhelming instinct for survival. However, every attempt to leave the property met with catastrophic interference, ranging from sudden violent illnesses to inexplicable car failures. The house itself seemed to sense their intentions, tightening its grip, determined to prevent their escape at all costs. Trapped, desperate, and nearly broken, the Lutz family faced the undeniable truth. Their home was not merely haunted, it was actively malevolent, determined to claim their lives and souls. They knew they had to find a way out soon, or succumb to the darkness that had already destroyed so many before them. Chapter 5. Descent into Madness. As days turned into weeks, the relentless assaults on the Lutz family intensified dramatically. The malignant presence residing within 112 Ocean Avenue tightened its grip, further eroding the fragile remnants of their sanity. George, now almost entirely consumed by paranoia, paced relentlessly through the house, constantly vigilant, jumping at the slightest noise or shadow. His once robust physique deteriorated visibly, his eyes sunken and haunted, reflecting the turmoil ravaging his mind. Kathy's plight worsened exponentially as the malevolent force targeted her directly. Episodes of violent physical abuse by unseen entities escalated, leaving deep bruises and painful welts on her body, unexplainable yet undeniable. Sleep offered no respite, only deeper, more vivid nightmares that replayed the horrifying history of the house in gruesome detail. Every waking moment was consumed by a constant state of terror, wearing her down both physically and emotionally. The children experienced profound trauma, their lives overshadowed by constant supernatural harassment. Daniel and Christopher became silent and withdrawn, their youthful innocence completely stripped away by their harrowing experiences. Invisible assailants regularly attacked them, causing injuries and terrorizing them at all hours. Their screams were frequently stifled by unseen hands, leaving them gasping and helpless. Missy, meanwhile, continued her terrifying communion with the entity she knew as Jodie. The pig-like demon's visits grew increasingly bold, openly manifesting inside the house, eyes blazing red with malevolent intent. Missy's behavior became alarmingly detached, exhibiting unsettling knowledge of past events and future calamities she could not possibly know. Kathy desperately attempted to break Jodie's influence over her daughter, but the child seemed inexplicably drawn deeper into the entity's sinister embrace. Attempts to secure spiritual intervention repeatedly failed, as clergy and psychics brought into the home fled in abject terror, warning of a profound evil beyond their power to combat. The house rejected every attempt at purification or blessing, violently expelling anyone who dared challenge its authority. George and Kathy found themselves increasingly alone, ostracized by their community, who perceived them as cursed, their presence an ominous threat to the peace of the entire neighborhood. Physical manifestations of the haunting escalated alarmingly, taking on frighteningly aggressive forms. Heavy objects flew through the air with deadly accuracy, shattering violently against walls or narrowly missing family members. Furniture moved of its own volition, barricading doors, blocking escape routes, trapping the family within rooms for hours at a time. George and Kathy often discovered themselves inexplicably locked inside rooms, banging desperately on doors until the house, as if amused by their terror, would finally relent. George's psychological breakdown accelerated. His thoughts darkened dramatically, and he began experiencing violent urges identical to those described by Ronald DeFeo Jr. years earlier. Voices whispered incessantly, urging him to commit unspeakable acts against his family, slowly eroding his resistance and sanity. He became withdrawn and hostile, spending long periods isolated in the basement, speaking quietly to unseen companions, his voice echoing ominously throughout the house. In moments of terrifying clarity, George recognized the trajectory of his madness, but felt powerless to halt it. The house's influence seeped deep into his consciousness, entwining itself irrevocably with his thoughts and emotions, manipulating him into believing the most heinous acts were necessary for survival. Kathy, observing George's alarming transformation, struggled desperately to protect herself and her children, increasingly fearful of her own husband. Her efforts, however, seemed futile in the face of an omnipresent evil force, one capable of corrupting even the strongest will. Each attempt to communicate with George resulted in explosive confrontations, further isolating her emotionally and physically within the home. Amid this mounting despair, the Lutzes found chilling evidence that their house had become a nexus for darker forces, rooted deeply in a sinister history of ancient occult practices. Hidden compartments within the basement revealed unsettling artifacts, ritualistic symbols etched into walls, black candles, and ancient texts depicting demonic summoning rites. Each discovery affirmed the terrifying reality. Their home was actively channeling evil, a magnet for entities intent on human suffering and destruction. As their descent into madness reached its apex, the family recognized the stark and terrifying truth. Their home was more than haunted. It was actively malicious, determined to consume them completely. Yet escape remained impossible, every attempt thwarted by an intelligent, sinister force determined to keep them imprisoned. The Lutzes stood on the brink of utter collapse, facing a horrifying reality from which there appeared no escape. Their sanity hanging by a thread, caught helplessly in the merciless grip of the Amityville horror. Chapter 6. The Escape. The nightmare at 112 Ocean Avenue had become utterly unbearable for the Lutz family. Each day seemed an eternity, filled with relentless supernatural torment and profound psychological anguish. George's mental state teetered precariously on the edge of collapse, consumed by delusions and violent compulsions that mirrored the murderous impulses of Ronald DeFeo Jr. Voices incessantly whispered horrific commands, urging him toward unthinkable acts. Kathy, physically battered and emotionally devastated, recognized that time was running out. Her maternal instinct screamed at her to protect her children at any cost. Every desperate attempt to communicate with George failed, escalating into explosive confrontations. She realized the malevolent force that had infiltrated their lives was systematically dismantling their unity, exploiting their vulnerabilities, and preparing the stage for inevitable tragedy. The children were deeply traumatized, shadows of the vibrant individuals they had once been. Daniel and Christopher, haunted by nightly assaults and violent episodes, lived in a perpetual state of terror. They became withdrawn and unresponsive, their eyes reflecting only fear and hopelessness. Missy's interactions with the demonic Jodie became openly confrontational, the entity frequently appearing within the house, mocking and threatening the entire family. One particularly harrowing night, Kathy awoke abruptly to an overwhelming sense of dread. She found Missy missing from her bed, panic surging through her veins. Frantically searching the house, she discovered her daughter standing perilously close to the open boathouse door, gazing blankly into the darkness. Kathy's heart stopped as she saw Jodie's glowing red eyes glaring malevolently from the shadows. Summoning every ounce of courage, Kathy snatched Missy away, fleeing back into the house as the sinister laughter of the entity echoed behind them. Realizing immediate action was critical, Kathy confronted George once more, pleading desperately for them to leave. But George, deeply manipulated by the evil force, violently resisted, arguing irrationally and aggressively. In a moment of profound clarity, Kathy understood she needed external help if they were ever to escape. Gathering her resolve, she reached out secretly to close friends, begging for assistance. Yet, even these attempts were undermined by the house's malevolent interference. Phone lines malfunctioned, vehicles refused to start, and every call for help was mysteriously disrupted. The family's isolation deepened, reinforcing their sense of hopelessness. Despair threatened to overwhelm Kathy entirely, but maternal instinct strengthened her determination to save her family. One stormy night, as an intense blizzard blanketed Amityville, the supernatural attacks intensified to unprecedented levels. The house shook violently, walls pulsating grotesquely as if alive. Deafening voices reverberated through every room, screaming horrific threats. Objects flew chaotically, smashing against walls, narrowly missing the family as they cowered together, united briefly by terror. In the chaos, George experienced an epiphany, a fleeting moment of lucidity amidst madness. Recognizing the mortal danger his family faced, he finally grasped the depth of the house's corruption and its deadly intentions. Overwhelmed by a sudden surge of clarity, he vowed internally to get his family out, no matter the cost. With frantic urgency, George and Kathy hastily gathered the children, determined to escape at once. The house sensed their intentions, responding violently, doors slamming shut, windows shattering, furniture shifting aggressively to block exits. Each step toward freedom became a desperate battle against supernatural opposition. The family moved with relentless determination, fighting through unseen hands grasping at them, enduring agonizing physical assaults. As they reached the front door, a terrifying roar erupted, shaking the foundation of the house. George struggled desperately to pry open the door, which seemed impossibly heavy, held shut by an invisible force. Kathy screamed prayers aloud, invoking protection as the house shrieked angrily, violently resisting their escape. With a final surge of determination and desperation, George forced the door open, propelling his family into the frigid night air. They stumbled into the howling blizzard, the doors slamming shut violently behind them. They ran blindly, propelled by sheer adrenaline, not daring to look back at the house that had nearly claimed their lives. Eventually, they reached safety at a nearby friend's home, collapsing from exhaustion and relief. They knew instinctively they could never return. Their harrowing 28-day ordeal had irrevocably changed them, leaving profound emotional and psychological scars. News of their dramatic escape spread rapidly, igniting widespread fascination and debate. Skeptics labeled their experience a fabrication, a sensationalized hoax, while believers saw their story as terrifying proof of true evil. Regardless, the Lutzes themselves were haunted by their memories, forever marked by their brief yet terrifying residence at 112 Ocean Avenue. Though physically free, they would remain psychologically imprisoned by the horrors they endured, living testaments to the power of the Amityville horror. Chapter 7. Echoes of Horror. Following the Lutz family's harrowing escape, news of the terrifying events at 112 Ocean Avenue quickly spread, captivating the imagination of the public and media alike. Reporters descended upon Amityville, eager to document every chilling detail. The small, quiet neighborhood was suddenly thrust into the national spotlight, becoming a hub of intense scrutiny, speculation, and morbid fascination. The Lutz family, still reeling from their traumatic experiences, found themselves at the center of a relentless media storm. Journalists and curiosity seekers hounded them incessantly, desperate for first-hand accounts of their nightmarish ordeal. The attention became overwhelming, leaving the family feeling further victimized and isolated, forced to relive their trauma repeatedly in interviews and investigations. Author J. Anson soon became intrigued by the Lutz family's story, compelled by the sheer magnitude and profound horror of their experiences. Collaborating closely with George and Kathy, Anson meticulously documented their terrifying encounters, aiming to provide an accurate and gripping portrayal of their harrowing ordeal. In 1977, his book, The Amityville Horror, was released to explosive success, captivating readers worldwide with its chilling narrative and vivid descriptions of the supernatural events. As the book skyrocketed in popularity, the legend of Amityville grew exponentially. The gripping tale attracted believers and skeptics alike, sparking heated debates over the authenticity of the haunting. Paranormal investigators, both amateur and professional, flocked to the house, eager to prove or disprove the supernatural claims. Their presence only deepened the controversy as they reported a range of eerie phenomena, from unexplained voices captured on recordings to strange electromagnetic readings. Visitors and ghost hunters regularly reported unsettling experiences while near the property. Feelings of oppressive dread, nausea, and disorientation were common. Photographs captured shadowy figures and mysterious anomalies, fueling public fascination and fear. The house seemed to radiate a lingering malevolence, as if the dark energies unleashed within its walls refused to dissipate. Local residents, previously skeptical or dismissive, found themselves caught up in the whirlwind of attention and curiosity. Rumors proliferated, detailing further sinister events occurring both before and after the Lutz family's occupation. Stories of cursed land, ancient burial grounds, and satanic rituals became commonplace, further embellishing the already grim narrative. The community became polarized, divided between those convinced of the haunting's authenticity and others who believed it an elaborate hoax. In 1979, the release of the Amityville horror film adaptation further cemented the property's legendary status. Audiences worldwide flocked to theaters, captivated and terrified by the dramatization of the Lutz family's experiences. The film's vivid portrayal of the supernatural horrors encountered at 112 Ocean Avenue intensified public interest, attracting an ever-growing audience of paranormal enthusiasts and thrill-seekers. Yet, amid the frenzy, the Lutz family struggled profoundly. Their experiences left deep psychological scars, manifesting as chronic anxiety, recurring nightmares, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Attempts to reclaim normalcy were repeatedly disrupted by public intrusion and relentless media attention, exacerbating their trauma and prolonging their suffering. Legal battles and accusations further complicated their lives, as skeptics accused them of fabricating their story for financial gain. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, wary of the stigma surrounding the family. The emotional toll became nearly unbearable, straining familial relationships and driving the Lutzes further into isolation. Despite the controversies and challenges, the legend of Amityville persisted, evolving into an enduring symbol of supernatural terror. Each subsequent owner of 112 Ocean Avenue grappled with the property's infamous reputation, facing ongoing intrusions from curious onlookers and ghost hunters. While some occupants reported experiencing eerie occurrences reminiscent of the Lutz family's accounts, others adamantly denied any paranormal activity, dismissing it as hysteria or sensationalism. Over time, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue became more than a mere dwelling. It transformed into an iconic monument of supernatural folklore, its sinister reputation perpetually haunting its inhabitants and captivating global imaginations. The echoes of horror lingered persistently, whispering reminders of the terrifying events once endured within its walls, ensuring the Amityville horror would never fade into obscurity. Chapter 8. The legend lives on. Decades passed, yet the chilling legacy of 112 Ocean Avenue continued to thrive, deeply embedded within popular culture and collective imagination. The story of the Amityville haunting evolved into an iconic narrative of supernatural horror, transcending its origins to become a universal symbol of dread and fascination. The Lutz family's ordeal profoundly impacted their lives, leaving indelible emotional and psychological scars. George and Kathy attempted numerous times to rebuild their lives, relocating frequently, always in search of a sense of normalcy that eluded them. Yet, their traumatic past remained ever present, intruding upon even their most ordinary moments. Nightmares, anxiety, and persistent feelings of paranoia plagued their daily lives, forever haunted by memories of their terrifying 28-day residence. The children, now grown, grappled continuously with the lingering effects of their traumatic experiences. Daniel, Christopher, and Missy carried deep-seated fears, their trust and sense of safety irrevocably shattered by the horrors of their childhood. Their relationships and personal lives were profoundly affected, burdened by the persistent shadow of their family's notorious history. Therapy and counseling provided only limited relief, unable to fully eradicate the deep-rooted trauma. Ronald DeFeo Jr., imprisoned for life, steadfastly maintained his claims of supernatural influence, asserting that the house itself had driven him to commit the murders. His statements continued to fuel debate, with skeptics viewing them as desperate attempts at absolution, while others saw disturbing parallels to the Lutz family's subsequent experiences, lending credence to the possibility of a genuinely malevolent force. Over the years, 112 Ocean Avenue became a major destination for ghost tourism. Visitors from around the globe traveled to Amityville, drawn by the house's sinister reputation, eager for glimpses of the paranormal, or simply to experience firsthand the eerie atmosphere surrounding the property. Local businesses capitalized on the influx of curious tourists, offering guided tours, ghost hunting expeditions, and merchandise commemorating the haunting. Despite ongoing fascination, subsequent occupants of the infamous house struggled with its notoriety. New owners attempted to distance themselves from the property's grim past, altering its appearance, even changing the house number, hoping to dissuade persistent intrusions and curiosity. Yet, no amount of modification could erase its dark history. Trespassers frequently sought out souvenirs or illicit glimpses inside, perpetuating its haunted reputation. Occasional reports of paranormal activity persisted, with some subsequent residents privately acknowledging eerie occurrences similar to those described by the Lutz family. Cold spots, mysterious noises, shadowy figures, and inexplicable feelings of dread. However, most publicly denied any supernatural events, attempting to reclaim the property from its sinister reputation and assert a semblance of normalcy. Amityville itself became synonymous with supernatural terror, inspiring countless horror narratives across books, films, and television series. The cultural impact of the Amityville horror extended far beyond its original context, becoming a cornerstone of horror storytelling. Its legacy endured through numerous adaptations, sequels, and reimaginings, each exploring new facets of its chilling narrative. Academic and paranormal researchers continued to investigate the haunting, producing extensive literature analyzing every aspect of the case. From psychological explanations of mass hysteria to comprehensive explorations of alleged supernatural phenomena. The Amityville haunting became a benchmark case, frequently referenced and studied within paranormal and psychological fields, its complexity offering fertile ground for ongoing debate and analysis. Despite extensive investigation and public discourse, definitive answers regarding the authenticity of the Lutz family's experiences remained elusive. Skeptics argued fiercely against supernatural explanations, citing financial motives and inconsistencies. Conversely, believers pointed to compelling eyewitness testimony, physical evidence, and enduring unexplained phenomena as proof of genuine paranormal activity. Ultimately, the true nature of the Amityville haunting remained shrouded in mystery, perpetually suspended between fact and legend. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue continued to embody the unknown, a physical manifestation of humanity's deepest fears and fascination with the supernatural. Its infamy transcended generations, ensuring its narrative remained relevant and captivating. The Lutz family's experiences at Amityville, regardless of interpretation, undeniably left an indelible mark on popular consciousness, reinforcing humanity's enduring fascination with the supernatural and unexplained. The legend of the Amityville horror persisted, a chilling testament to the profound power of fear, the unknown, and the stories we tell ourselves to understand the darkness lurking just beyond our comprehension. Thus, the haunting legacy of Amityville endured, its chilling whispers echoing through time, forever captivating and terrifying those brave or foolish enough to listen.